Hi, I'm George Crump, lead analyst for Storage Switzerland. Thank you for joining us today. Today we're coming to you from Qumulo's office in Seattle, Washington. One of the things we're going to do while we're here is talk about their latest announcement. But before we do, we're going to talk a little bit about the state of the file system market. Joining me to help with that conversation is Jason Sturgeon. He's a senior product manager at Qumulo. Jason, thanks for joining us today.
Very happy to be here.
So let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the file system market as you guys see it.
Okay. So we are what you would refer to as software-defined storage. And so software-defined storage is kind of a loaded term.
Yeah.
It can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It ranges from you run Windows on something and you run a piece of software on it and it runs in lots of different places,
Sure.
or to something that looks much more like an appliance. And so there's quite a spectrum there.
Right.
But the real value of software-defined storage in general is that it lowers cost for the customer, and it really avoids lock-in. I'm not tied to one appliance or one vendor forever. I have flexibility to deploy that in multiple locations.
Okay, that makes sense.
And so we really deliver on that value by having this ground-up approach that we have to our product. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about how we interact with hardware and how that delivers real value to the customer.
Yeah, because I guess one of the big things with being software defined like that is you can really adapt and adopt new hardware as quickly as it comes to market, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the benefit. You get really the lowering of the cost of industry standard hardware coming very quickly to the customer and real value. A lot like what you see with compute today.
Sure.
I got standard boxes I can buy. I can load a virtualization layer and I can deliver it on the compute side, but we don't see that yet on the storage side as much.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, take us through it.
Okay, so our technology is cluster based, and so we have at least 4 nodes, which are just servers that have a CPU, network, memory, disks in them, and then we aggregate them together with software. So we have intelligent software in here. So this is the hardware layer, and it is important, but it's really the software that makes this thing all work as one unit.
Sure.
And so the Qumulo software has multiple layers to it, and the most interesting layer as it applies to the hardware is what we call the scalable block store.
Okay.
So the scalable block store is this ground-up approach that we started 7 years ago when we developed this technology to write directly to the drives. Mm-hmm. And so there's no file system in the way. We are writing bare to those drives. We don't even use a partition map. We write bare to those drives.
Okay.
So we're getting the full performance of those drives without having a proprietary image that runs that. We're actually a user space application, so we have flexibility in where we can be deployed at the same time.
Okay, so that's really interesting because so even though you run on top of Linux, your I/O is direct to the hardware itself.
Exactly. We think of Linux as really as a hardware abstraction layer that lets us run in lots of different places.
Gotcha.
And so that means I can run on a Dell and HPE, or I can run an AWS and GCP, and I give real flexibility to my customer, but I still at the same time give real performance and get all the value I can out of the hardware underlying that system.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, good.
And so we have these other layers in the system, but the scalable block store is really what applies to how we're talking about hardware here.
Okay.
And so we work really hard to create an engine inside of Qumulo that allows us to deliver new hardware very quickly. And we're going to have some announcements today that I want to talk about around that.
Okay.
And so I'm very excited about that. But first I'd like to talk about a little bit of trends that we're seeing in the industry.
Yeah, let's do that.
So in the industry, you're seeing really a huge drop in flash prices. So there's, even the last quarter, we've seen about a 30% drop in the cost of flash, which is really quite phenomenal. Yeah. And there's a few drivers of that. There's an oversupply in the industry right now. There's also QLC drives, and the TLC vendors are kind of fighting to be the SSD of choice.
Sure.
And then you're also seeing that NVMe is now shipping more than SATA and SAS SSDs. So we've hit that inflection point. So going forward, NVMe is the only way to go.
Right, yeah, sure.
And when we built our all-flash product to start, we started with NVMe. We were the first file product to do NVMe and scale out. And it really has to be done ground up. The way you interact with NVMe drives is very different than the way you interact with these other drives. And to get the full performance and value out of those takes a ground up approach to be able to.
But that comes back to the way you guys have built the software, right?
Exactly.
That you can do that so quickly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the other thing that this relates to is how things are managed today and where they're going in the future.
Okay.
So when we look at traditional layouts of people dealing with a file store, there's often a flash layer or a very expensive flash fast tier here. And then there's a disk layer in here, and then usually that's tiered to tape, and that was kind of the traditional approach to the problem. Yeah. So now what we're seeing as a trend is a lot of systems are tiering to the cloud, which doesn't really lower costs, but it kind of simplifies things in
Sure.
some ways. But most of those storage systems treat cloud as just another tier and not really a place to run an active workload, which is really where most of the value from the cloud actually is.
Yeah, we call it using it as a digital dumping ground.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So in addition to that, with the trend of flash dropping, we're seeing a compression here where the disk-based systems are becoming less and less common.
Yeah.
But longer term, we really believe that people don't want tiers. They want no more tiers. They want one stack of it's all my file and I want it to be online.
Right.
And given the modern architectures of I need to be able to have my data available all the time and in multiple locations, we see that being two multiple locations. So you've got one on-prem location, you got maybe one in another data center, maybe one in AWS and GCP, and you can decide where those live and how much of it you need to be in those locations depending on what your environment looks like.
Yeah, and what we're seeing is people will have this AWS and GCP and use different capabilities of each cloud for different reasons.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're offering different things there, whether it's GPUs or whether it's a AI as a service of some kind or ML, and they want to be able to take advantage of those.
Right, yeah, that makes sense.
So the drivers around this are really an increase in the amount of files that people are being asked to manage, but not really any change in the amount of people that get to manage that, right?
Yeah, that's flat.
Yeah. And then we're seeing a lowering of cost of the underlying hardware over time.
Right.
And then combined with that is people want to get value out of their file. They don't want, I mean, really businesses are defined by their files. Their data defines the value, their IP, how you build your thing or how you track your customer. That's all value, and they want to get more value out of it. And so having things be offline isn't really something anybody wants anymore. They want to get as much value out of that as possible.
Yeah, yeah.
And so all that drives towards this flattening process.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, we're even seeing now where there's some AI stuff coming on the market. Like, now it's, how quickly can you answer my questions? And now we're even seeing, these are the questions you should be asking. Right?
Yeah.
So it's that market is just really interesting.
Oh, it's super interesting. And I'm seeing this on actual mobile devices where you're doing ML on the device. It's crazy. Yeah. So it's really cool. So on the platform side, we've got some new announcements.
Okay, let's do
So, so in our family, so we run on Dell, HPE, AWS, GCP, and those systems are what I would refer to as tailored. So while you can put anything in here, it's important to know the software, the storage software well enough to figure out what the right amount of the memory is, the CPU, the network, the disk. And if you're just putting anything in it, you're really not getting the value out of software defined. So we tailor these configurations, whether it's our first party or whether it's with HP or Dell, we're tailoring that configuration, but we're not customizing. We're not putting sheet metal in there, bending anything. We're not putting
proprietary.
Yeah, we're not putting proprietary cards in there. So we want it to be all our values in the software. We want that software to be able to run anywhere.
Gotcha.
So we're very conscious of I'm not going to adopt some new technology if it really isn't mainstream yet.
Gotcha. Okay.
So to that point, we have three families that we sell as Qumulo hardware. One is what we call the P series, so that's our all-flash performance system.
Okay.
And that was built, we were the first to market with an all-flash file system on NVMe. That system has 24 NVMe SSDs and 400 gig network cards, 100 gig network ports on it.
Okay.
So it is a screamer.
Right.
And so that system today comes in two configurations. One we call the P23T, which is 23 terabytes. That's how we simply name our systems today. And the 92T, which is 92 terabytes.
Right.
And then we have another family we call the C series. So this is using disk, but it has flash in front of it. And so the data is written to flash first. We cache very aggressively on the flash. And so in reality, most of customers' workloads is served completely from flash or memory in their interactions. So it really kind of gives the best of both worlds, the economics of spinning disk with a lot of the performance of flash.
Okay.
And so today in the C family, we have the C72T. And this is a one-use system with 12 spindles in it, so it's really dense.
Right.
But we're using relatively small drives in that configuration because that's more focused on customers that need more performance than a lot of capacity.
Gotcha.
And then we have the K family. So the K series is focused on nearline archive, or what some people call an active archive.
Yeah.
So I don't have a lot of performance needs, or maybe I've got a workload that has already tiering in it, and I just want another tier to go to.
Sure.
Or there are some workloads that are purely not very performant, like video surveillance is a prime example of that, right?
Yeah.
And so we have the K144T, which my handwriting is not fantastic. And so what we're announcing today is all of these configurations are getting bigger drives.
Okay.
So today we are going to put a 14 terabyte drive in both of these. So we're going to end up with a K168T.
Okay.
and a C168T.
Okay. And then now, when we're saying 168T, that's per node.
Per
capacity.
node, right?
Okay,
So
yeah.
and you start with 4, right? And
Yeah.
you can go big from there. So
Gotcha.
we're talking multiple petabytes of scale
Sure.
on these systems.
Very
all the way.
quickly.
Very
Yeah,
quickly,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. And then on the all-flash family, we're now bringing the largest NVMe SSD, the 7.68 terabyte drive out. So
Okay.
that translates, when you put 24 into a box, to 184 terabytes in a 2U system.
Wow. Okay.
And the beauty of that is delivering a phenomenal amount of performance in just even 4 of these nodes.
Oh, yeah.
And so the question is now the time for file to move to flash? And I think it absolutely is. And there's a few drivers around that. One of those is that with this economic change, with this system, we're able to drop the cost enormously to the point that we're able to sell per terabyte what we were selling spinning disk-based solutions for 36 months ago.
Huh.
So it has been a big game changer, and we're seeing more and more customers driven, not just because they want flash, but because they've got a mandate to move to flash. They want to get spinning disk out of their data centers
Right.
for various reasons. Some of them are purely cost savings from a data center cooling, powering perspective.
Sure.
We're also seeing that, density is going to get larger pretty soon. SSDs are going to get bigger than hard drives, right? So that helps with the data center cost problem.
Yeah.
But it also has less failures. There's just a lower failure rate on SSDs in general. So when you've got a storage system with hundreds of disks, if those are disks or SSD based, you're going to have less times you got to go into the data center and have someone swap a drive.
Yeah, it makes
right?
total sense.
Yeah. And then the other one is performance, right? Obviously, all flash delivers performance, and you don't have to worry about whether or not it came from a disk or was cache hit or not.
Sure.
And that really translates to future proofing, right? I don't have to worry about where my workload's going to be for this files for 5 years from now, right? 5 years from now, it's like a guessing game to figure out where the performance profile I need, right? When I buy flash, I know that I'm going to have tons of performance, and the performance we have delivered today is phenomenal, and we're just getting started. There is tons of headroom in the technology, the underlying hardware technology, to go 10 times faster than what we have today.
Okay. So let me ask you this question. I haven't heard about this level of pricing yet. How are you guys able to do this?
So because we're software defined and we built the system from scratch, we can quickly adopt these drives. So because these are already shipping chassis and configurations, to bring a bigger drive into a system literally is about a 2-month process for us. We got to get the drives, we got to put them in, and we got to run them through a certification cycle.
Sure.
And that's really about all it takes. And so that really allows us to deliver on what people call the commodity curve, right? We're running on standardized hardware that goes down and down over time, and we are working to create an engine to deliver that as fast as possible.
Well, it sounds to me like you're kind of right on the front of the curve too, right?
Yeah.
You're really getting the full benefit of the wave. So
Yeah, we're always looking for how to give more value to the customer, as we are, again, software. And what I love about Qumulo is our incentives are making the software better. We're a software subscription, right? We're not making a bunch of money off the hardware. It's about the software and making the customer get more value out of their storage.
Got it. Okay. So let's go ahead and wrap up the video. But before we do, let's talk a little bit about Qumulo, what your guys' history is and where you're going. And then also we need to explain what this guy's doing hanging out in the video.
Sure. So I believe Qumulo is really built to be the curators of people's file data, and it's really our mission. And so no matter where that file data goes 10, 20 years from now, we want to be the company that people trust to store their file data and to get the best value out of their file data.
Okay, great. And then
so the Grump Quad, I joined a couple years ago, and I asked the question of what the Grump Quad is. And the best answer I think I got that I really liked was that the Grump Quad's angry all the time because he's never satisfied with what we're delivering. He wants it to always be better and better for our customer.
oh, good. Well, that's a perfect answer. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
So there you have it. I'm George Crump, lead analyst with Storage Switzerland. Thank you for joining us today.